Hey there guys, PC Guy here with news in tech and gaming for the week, and it's been a pretty damn busy week in terms of tech news and also some gaming stuff on the side, so this might be a bit of a longer episode. There are two main topics to touch on this week. One I will touch mostly in passing, that is the launch of Intel's Comet Lake, and not that it's not important, but I already did a video on it with my opinion. Did not get a chance to actually test the products myself, considering, well, we're a small channel, we don't get reviews, and it's pretty expensive hardware to get, plus I could not get it even if I wanted to ahead of time for an actual review. So there's that, and if you'd like to change that and for me to be able to give that type of content to you guys, it's really important to increase our subscribers numbers, so hit the subscribe button if you are not already. But in any case, as a short sum up of the Intel video, the description, the card will be here for you guys to watch the rest of my commentary if you'd like on the other video. But they do beat AMD on a side-by-side basis, comparing them to the, well, let's say 3900X to 10900K, 3700X to the 10700K, and so they beat them on a straight comparison in terms of single core performance and gaming performance, but they still cannot catch up in multi-thread operation. And what that means is that I still basically recommend AMD if you do anything else besides gaming. And if you are just a pure gaming person that wants to have max FPS, well, then feel free to go Intel, because, well, they do squeeze out some extra performance, even if it's not much. There's the caveat that Intel will be more expensive than AMD. AMD is a lot cheaper for not being much slower, and AMD does give you a cooler with your CPUs, which Intel doesn't. So that's a consideration to take in mind. So overall, I kind of would recommend AMD to basically just about everyone, unless you really want to be gaming at a crazy amount of FPS. Speaking of actually comparisons, AMD has dropped the Ryzen 9 3900X's price by almost $100, so it is at an MSRP of $410 just about now. It was already selling under the MSRP, if we are going to be quite honest, so it might drop further below, making it an even more attractive proposition comparing it to the 10900K that just launched. This was probably not the best move from AMD's marketing team. Not that I'm against them dropping the price on it, I'm all for it and I applaud it, but they should have dropped the price before or at the launch time of the 10900K. The result of them dropping it now afterwards is that all the day one reviews that compared the two and gave their advice on what people should be looking out for and what people should be buying, they did not take that in consideration. They did not mention anything like the price, and they are still comparing them head to head with the old price of the 3900X in mind. So yeah, that might really change a lot of advice and a lot of well, reviews that people gave to the Intel's part. And speaking of bad marketing, we won, boys. Zen 3 is going to be supported on the 400 series motherboards. After about a week of intense protest and backlash, the AMD has officially responded via their Reddit account. They could have made a bit of a better announcement, I would say, but they seem to love Reddit. And they have confirmed that they will be working to make Zen 3 processors compatible with all 400 series motherboards. Now, this compatibility, however, comes with a certain set of caveats, which AMD has also listed in their official post. And, well, other than a few blah 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 points, the important ones are that these optional biases will be provided to the brands, and it's the brand's responsibility to implement them, and they probably all will, because no one wants to be that guy that does not support Zen 3. In any case, the important points for those of you that are running 400 series is that it will be a one-way trip, as stated on point 3. Once you flash your BIOS with the Zen 3 compatible BIOS, you will not be able to go back to previous BIOS versions that support other CPUs that have been removed, because this is also another of the points. The way that they are going to make it work is to have more space in the BIOS by removing old CPUs that are not as popular anymore. This is probably going to be, you're probably going to start with the APUs and the ones at the lower end, like the older CPUs of the lineup that are still supported, and probably keep other more recent versions available. They go on to detail that they want to kind of protect the customer experience and make sure no one is left with a CPU that cannot really work with their motherboard or break the motherboard alternatively by making the BIOS only install or only be available to be downloaded even after verification that you do indeed have a Zen 3 processor that will be compatible with the post-flash BIOS. It is not completely known how this verification will occur, but I am guessing it is going to be just a prompt like, what CPU do you have? Are you sure that this is your CPU? And if a lot of warnings I am expecting of this is irreversible and don't do it if you're not sure. They also detail that the timing and availability will vary and will probably not be as soon as entry is launched, so it's probably not going to be a day one thing, and if you are looking to upgrade immediately, you might actually have to wait a while before the BIOSes are out there. They warn you at the end that this is the last step for the 400 series and there will be no support beyond Zen 3, so yeah, this is expected, but at the same time it is extremely reasonable. Last point, they do recommend that you have a 500 series motherboard for Zen 3, despite 400 being supported. Now, these are obviously great news. AMD had led people to believe, indirectly I might add, they never confirmed it, but they led people to believe that Zen 3 would run on 400 series, and then kind of pulled the rug out from under everyone, which led to the backlash that we saw. Thankfully, they did correct it and they managed to provide that support. Personally, I would still recommend you to go with a 500 series motherboard for several reasons. One of them being better VRMs, better compatibility, more features like PCIe Gen 4, and last but not least, the price argument is going to become a little bit mute because B550 is here and they're actually pretty affordable. So the B550 motherboards have been announced and they feature PCIe Gen 4, which is kind of a question mark if they were going to have it or not, but they do seem to all support PCIe Gen 4 and they start off of cheaper models at around $100, which is pretty reasonable. So for those of us buying new systems or building new systems, it does not make a lot of sense anymore to go for the 400 series even though it will support Zen 3, if the 500 series is here at these affordable prices. So that's definitely good news, and it's just a shame that it took so long to get there. This article on Tom's Hardware goes to detail several brands and the listings of several B550 motherboards that they have in the works. Most of them don't have prices available yet, just a spec list, but Asus does have a list of its B550 motherboards here available. Taking a quick glance at the chip making market, which is, well, quite of importance to us at like PC Tech, since these chips are pretty much everywhere. Samsung has announced that they will be building a new 5nm UV line in South Korea, and they are aiming to start 5nm mass production at the second half of 2021. This is good news for the supply chain, I suppose, considering TSMC has also announced that they will be building a factory in Arizona, I believe, with 5nm also being its target. Samsung on their own, they have a factory in Austin, Texas, I believe, and they are also kind of considering expanding it, although no actual plans have been announced yet. And what is a prime example of basically geopolitics interfering in the tech market, TSMC has halted all new orders from Huawei in response to the US administration's policies to kind of limit how companies utilize US developed software while selling to other markets outside of the US. And this kind of is a direct jab at China, and TSMC does use US developed software and hardware for its chip manufacturing, and Huawei is one of their biggest customers with chips for its phones. I have actually reported not so long ago that they had chips planned all the way to 2021, 2022 to be produced by TSMC, and as it stands right now, that probably is not really going forward, and yeah, that is probably going to take quite a blow to Huawei's supply chain, and it will be forcing TSMC to kind of pick a side where it does its business. Since China's in the news, Valve has quietly released Steam China to alpha status, so it's not really full on yet, but they seem to be starting to gear towards the full-on launch. And it seems to have a lot of locked features so far. It's unknown if it will change when the client is a bit more developed and a bit more fully fledged out. The friend list, for example, is quite a bit sanitized with no profile pictures, and usernames. They might kind of improve it somehow to let it on the full-on release, or it just might be a fact that they have to be approved by someone, some agency, to actually be able to display it, and they might have to do that individually, picture by picture, name by name, but we'll have to see when that actually launches. It actually also has gameplay limitation features, like not letting you play for too long, or not letting you play at all between certain hours, depending on government guidelines. So it does seem to be a very heavily sanitized version of Steam. It almost feels bad to do so many China-related articles all in a somewhat bashful manner, but Ubisoft has sued Apple and Google over a copy of Rainbow Six Siege that was on the App Store. Now, you could argue that it's not Apple's or Google's responsibility to see if the app manufacturers actually, developers that is, actually respect other people's IPs and copyrights and all that stuff. However, technically, the game was owned by a subsidiary of the Chinese tech retailer Alibaba, and we all know how strict, let's say, copyright and IP infringements are taken in China. So Ubisoft has kind of figured that the surefire way to actually get it taken down would be to immediately go after Apple and Google as the platform owners and not really the developers, because that would really result in nothing. We have gotten some information like that the game has in the meantime been removed to avoid further issues, so it seems to have worked out for Ubisoft. Phantasy Star Online 2 will be releasing for the PC on May 27. The game has been out in Japan for, well, several years now, and has been released to the Xbox One on April, I believe, but it will now be available for PC players as well. It will feature fully voiced over in English versions as well as fully localized text as usual, and there will be a North American server. It is not known if there will be a EU server yet, so if you're from Europe, you might have to play on the American servers. You will have a little bit more latency, but the game does not seem to be region locked, so you will be able to at least play anyway. Sega has promised more fun surprises over the rest of 2020, and it will apparently support full crossplay with the Xbox One version, not with the version that has been on in Japan since 2012. And in what are even more good news for PC gaming, and although keep in mind, this next one, it's a non-confirmed rumor. It's, well, a leak, whatever you want to call it. So don't put too much stock in it yet, but it seems like Bloodborne is coming to PC. It has been rumored several times throughout the years, but it has been gaining some more traction in the last few times that it might well be coming to PC after all, especially now that Horizon Zero Dawn recently became one of the first PS5 exclusives, well, PS4 that is, to be ported over to the PC, or announced to be ported over. So it seems plausible that Bloodborne might be the next one in line, considering the game's popularity, how famous Dark Souls and Demon Souls became on the PC as well, so it would make sense for Bloodborne to be the next one to take that step. On the other hand, even the person doing this claim and this leak says that it is not 100% confirmed and to wait for official news, so temporary expectations. And in any case, what they say is that it is currently in development for PC and it could take 10 months up to a year. So yeah, it's not going to be next week or anything. The schedule for the 32nd version of Hot Chips, which, well, is a conference that goes mostly around the chip makers and such, more of an industry thing, has been announced online, and there's some interesting additions to that. The conference will happen from August 16 to August 18, which will be interesting because of the next article that I'm going to show you in a second. But there are some interesting additions like Intel, Microsoft, etc. There are also, let me scroll down until I find it actually. There are some Xeon announcements from Intel that we can expect. I'm just scrolling down and give you guys the more interesting stuff that applies to most of us, home consumers. There's some inside look at Tiger Lake, which will be the next mobile Intel CPUs. There is Ryzen 7 APUs, 7nm Ryzen 4000 APUs, so the next generation of APUs that have been talked about over the past week or two. There are also going to be a few other interesting points, specifically Intel, the Xe GPU architecture, a little bit of a deep dive on Xbox Series X, and NVIDIA's next generation GPUs, performance and innovation for GPU computing. This particular one is especially interesting. I just told you that the Hot Chips is going to be happen on the 16th to 18th of August this year, right? So there has been an article that came up on DigiTimes that kind of gives an interesting look at NVIDIA's activities on that time frame. Once more, this is no NVIDIA confirmed information, so take it with a grain of salt, but the rumors are gaining traction and more sources are kind of pointing towards this. The thing we need to look at this is mostly, graphic cards shipments report, but the second sentence here kind of gives it away a little bit. With AMD and NVIDIA set to launch their next generation GPUs in September, graphic card vengeance, blah, 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 blah. So this half of a sentence here, right here, is what we are really looking at. So according to DigiTimes, and we cannot know what their sources are, how reliable they are, and all that, etc. But they appear to indicate that both AMD and NVIDIA will be launching next generation GPUs in vendor. So this would be in September, sorry. So this should be, RDNA 2 and Ampere RTX 3000, supposedly. This could potentially mean an announcement at Hot Chips at 16 to 18, like we said, followed by a launch in September a few weeks later, giving a few weeks to build up hype, people to pre-order, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we'll see. There are no confirmed news, obviously, so far. Take this all with a grain of salt, but the timing seems to kind of match up a little bit. On a few quick articles to kind of close up the episode. First, 8TB M.2 SSD is in development. It is a Sabrent Rocket Q line, so it is QLC level memory, so 4 bits stored per cell. These are known to kind of degrade faster than with less bits per cell, let's say, but models are improving and the quality is improving as development goes by naturally. Fabricants are actually researching into PLC right now, so 5 bits per cell instead of the current 4, to be able to squeeze more capacity on M.2 SSDs, in the same space, really. When it launches, this will hold the record for the biggest M.2 SSD, twice the size of the nearest competitor, which is a 4TB, also from the same brand. And yeah, it will feature PCIe 3rd generation, so no PCIe Gen 4 yet. And it will probably be far from affordable. For comparison, the 4TB Rocket Q that we just saw costs about $750 on UX, so you can imagine the price for this one. For those of you chasing the dream of a fully silent PC, Noctua plans to release a fanless heatsink later this year. They showed it up at Computex 2019. It was a prototype back then, and it supported both AM4 and LGA 1151 sockets. Unknown if it will support the current 1200. I would like to think it would, because otherwise kind of late to launch a product that does not support latest stuff, that is. And it weighs a whopping 1.5 kilos according to the article, so make sure you screw your motherboards properly when you have it, if you would install something like this. And yes, I know that there are already other fanless heatsinks out there for low TDP, but this was more geared towards being able to cool up to, for example, 120 watts of TDP, which is the high-end stuff. They give the example that it could keep 9900K cool under load, so that is more something that would be usable for most of us and actually have no CPU cooling at all. You would obviously need a case with a good airflow, because that heat is not going to magically disappear, but it would be one fan less in the system. Now, these have been the highlights for the week. Hope you guys have enjoyed the episode, and drop a like if you have, drop a dislike if you didn't, or if you absolutely hate it, and make sure to leave a comment to let me know how much you hate my videos. In any case, subscribe if you are not already, because that's the way that we can grow and do more and better content for you guys. Like, for example, doing actual testing on the Comet Lake that just launched that we couldn't. And hey, hopefully next time there is a major CPU launch, we'll be a bit bigger and we'll be able to play with that a little bit. So any help with that would be appreciated. And yeah, hit that subscribe button for that. This has been Attic PC Guy, and I'll see you in the next week. Have fun in the meantime.